Hey guys, welcome back to another video from the Election Predictions official YouTube channel. My name is Ryan Guest. In today's video, we will be taking a look at what a potential 2024 Electoral College Map would look like if the national popular vote were decided by Real Clear Politics' current head-to-head polling average between incumbent President Joe Biden and former Republican President Donald Trump, who as of today remains the undisputed frontrunner for the Republican nomination. Before we take a look though, please make sure to subscribe to my channel down below so you never miss a video as I ramp up content ahead of the 2024 cycle. We're counting down the days now until the Iowa caucuses in early January, and there will be plenty of forecast videos, predictions, and analysis to come. In the meantime, make sure to check out electionpredictionsofficial.com. It will be the very first link in the description and comment section down below. This is the site that will host all of my forecasts and non-YouTube content in 2024 and beyond. So bookmark it, or just remember electionpredictionsofficial.com. Alrighty, so as of October 31st, 2023, RCP's general election polling average between Biden and Trump has the former Republican president ahead by 0.7%. Each of the last 6 reputable polls included in this average have Trump ahead of or tied with Biden in a head-to-head matchup. And taking a look at the tracking graph, Trump has maintained his advantage over the Democrats since early September. Now, to those of you unfamiliar with national popular vote polling from the 2020 election, Joe Biden held a 7-point lead over Trump heading into Election Day on November 3rd. And RCP's polling average was actually relatively generous to Trump, as 538 had Biden ahead by 8.5 points, and 270 to win had his advantage at exactly 8%. Ultimately, Biden won the national popular vote in 2020 by 4.5%, down several points from all of the average polling trackers, but it was still a comfortable victory margin, the largest for any Democrat since Barack Obama in 2008. It helped him secure victory in 25 states, plus the District of Columbia, totaling 306 electoral votes to Donald Trump's 232. However, now running as the incumbent and presumptive Democratic nominee a year out from Election Day 2024, Biden is either losing to Trump or effectively tied in most head-to-head polls. Comparably, Trump only held a lead over Biden in one single poll after February of 2020, well before Biden was even seen as the frontrunner for the Democratic nomination at the time. Saying that, it's no secret that the sitting president's re-election odds are in serious trouble. His approval rating recently matched an all-time low of 37%, according to Gallup, with just 75% of Democrats now approving of his job performance, the lowest reading of at any point during his presidency. It's not hard to explain to you why this is significantly bad news for Biden, as taking a look at Trump's approval rating from around the time of the election in 2020, roughly 46% of Americans held a positive view of Trump as president, including 95% of Republicans and 41% of independents. Biden's job approval among independents today, meanwhile, has dropped to 35%. Now, of course, contextually, this downturn comes in the wake of a major foreign policy crisis, in which Biden's response has angered many progressives within his own party. Still, though, Biden's approval rating throughout his 11th quarter in office, spanning from July 20th of 2023 all the way up to October 19th, averaged just 40%, the second lowest of any president since World War II. And if we take a peek over at 538's tracker, Biden's approval has not eclipsed 45% since October of 2021. Ultimately, the lack of notable alternatives presented to Democrats in the invisible primary process has angered many within his own party, while concerns surrounding his age and fitness to carry out a second term have plagued his numbers across the political spectrum. All of that being said, though, the single worst data point for his and the Democratic Party's strategy in 2024 is the growing pro-Republican bias of the Electoral College. Republican candidates have secured 270 electoral votes and been elected president without securing a majority of the popular vote in 2 of the previous 6 presidential elections. According to 538, Republicans enjoyed a 3.5-point advantage in the Electoral College in 2020. That means that the average margin in the 2 tipping point states of Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, the states that delivered or would have delivered the 270th electoral vote Biden or Trump needed to win, was D plus 0.9, which was 3.5 points more Republican than the national popular vote margin of Biden plus 4.4. Back in 2016, when Trump defeated Hillary Clinton despite losing the popular vote by more than 2%, the Electoral College also had a 2.9-point Republican bias. Simply put, the electoral issue for Democrats, especially in close elections, centers on the concept of wasted votes. Specifically, the Democratic Party has increasingly built substantial popular vote margins in large, deep blue states that offer no additional benefit in the Electoral College. For example, the state of California, where Joe Biden won the state's 55 electoral votes in 2020 by a margin of 5.1 million votes over Donald Trump. Biden would have received all of California's 55 electoral votes, whether he won by 5.1 million votes or just 1. And when you extend this to all 50 states and Washington, D.C., Democrats wasted 15.1 million votes, compared to the Republicans' 8 million. That difference of 7.1 million votes is roughly equivalent to Biden's national popular vote margin and approximately his combined margin of victory in California and New York. Now, these trends are expected to continue in 2024 and beyond, leading many analysts, including myself, to argue that it won't be nearly enough for Democrats to win narrow popular vote victories in future elections. The way the map has shifted in favor of the GOP, Democrats likely need to win the national popular vote by at least 3.5 to 4 points in any given election to reach a minimum of 270 electoral votes. Let's once again go back to the 2020 election for an example. Despite Biden's 4.5-point victory nationwide, he was only really elected president by a combined margin of less than 80,000 votes in 4 battleground states. That is, the combined margin of victory for Biden in Georgia, Arizona, Wisconsin, and Nevada was 76,514 votes. Had Trump managed to make up that narrow margin in each of these states, he would have won with 275 electoral votes to Biden's 263. Again, that's even with Biden winning the national popular vote, totaling nearly 160 million votes cast nationwide by 4.5 percentage points. So that brings us back to RCP's 2024 head-to-head polling average between Biden and Trump, with the former Republican president ahead of Biden by 0.7%. In all likelihood, this will not end up being the case, but if we assume that Trump does indeed win the national popular vote next year by 0.7%, and that every single state shifts exactly 5.2% in favor of Trump, which is the difference between a 4.5% Biden victory and a 0.7% Trump victory, then here is what the Electoral College Map would look like. On your screen right now are the results of the 2020 election in each state, with those decided by less than 2% in the tilt Democrat or tilt Republican column, those decided between 2 and 7% in the lean column, margins between 7 to 12% are rated as likely, and then any state decided by more than 12% in either direction are considered safe. Starting with the most Republican states, Alaska, Iowa, Ohio, South Carolina, and Maine's 2nd Congressional District would all move firmly into the safe Republican column, or solid if that's what you prefer. The states of Texas and Florida, meanwhile, decided by 5.6% and 3.4% respectively in 2020, would move into the likely Republican range. And then North Carolina, which Trump carried by 1.4% in 2020, would become lean Republican. That said, here's where things get ugly for Democrats, though. Nevada, Arizona, Georgia, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan would all join North Carolina in the lean Republican column, giving Republicans 312 electoral votes. Joe Biden won all 6 of these states by less than 3% in 2020, and would lose all of them if such a pro-Republican shift were to occur in 2024. Meanwhile, Minnesota and Nebraska's 2nd Congressional District would both move into the tilt Democrat column, and then Maine, New Hampshire, Virginia, and New Mexico would all transition from likely to lean blue, while finally Oregon, Colorado, Illinois, and New Jersey would drop from safe Democrat to likely Democrat. This is a scary and nightmarish-looking map for Joe Biden and the Democratic Party, but it is a scenario that would not look too dissimilar from what a potential 2024 map could look like if Trump wins the popular vote by up to 1%. That said, it would be disingenuous for me to say that this is the most accurate picture of what a narrow Trump popular vote win would look like on a 2024 electoral map. States themselves always shift independently from the national environment from election to election due to demographic shifts, as well as additional factors like the relative strength of the state's parties' organizational efforts, for example. This is one of the many data points I have featured in my 2024 forecast, the relative shift of each state against the nation between the last few election cycles. In this column here, you can see how every state in the country trended between 2016 to 2020, independently of the national environment. So, for example, while Donald Trump's victory margin in Iowa decreased from 9.4% in 2016 to 8.2% in 2020, considering that Biden improved on Clinton's 2016 national popular vote margin by 2.4% himself, Iowa actually shifted 1.2% in favor of Trump between 2016 and 2020 when you consider the national shift as well. In another example, a state like Minnesota, where Biden won by 7.1% compared to Clinton's 1.5% margin from 2016, although technically he improved Democrats' margin by 5.6% between those two elections, since the entire country shifted 2.4% in favor of Biden as well, the relative shift in Minnesota was only D plus 3.2. Now, the reason I'm taking so long to highlight this is that taking this data into account would probably paint a more accurate picture of what a Trump plus 0.7 national popular vote margin would look like on a 2024 map with all of the context in mind. So let's create a new column here and type in a formula that takes the 2020 margin in the state, and then let's add a 5.2 point national shift in favor of Trump, as is the difference between a Biden plus 4.5 win and a Trump plus 0.7 win, as I've mentioned, before finally adding the relative shift of the state between 2016 to 2020, and then apply this to every single state down the column. And here are our numbers. Nothing changes at the electoral vote count level, but there are some changes in race classifications, including that Florida moves all the way into the safe Republican column, as it was one of the only states that actually voted for Trump by a larger margin in 2020 than in 2016, regardless of the national environment. However, both Michigan and Georgia would go from lean Republican to tilt Republican. Georgia shifted 3 points in favor of Democrats against the nation in 2020, while Michigan did by 0.6%. Under these conditions, they would both favor Trump by just under 2%, while the states of Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Nevada would favor Trump by more than 4.5% each, as they each shifted several points in favor of Republicans when considering the national environment between 2016 to 2020. Elsewhere, Minnesota would become lean blue. Virginia and Maine would revert back to likely Democratic. The states of Colorado and Oregon would go back to safe as well. Perhaps most notably here, though, is that Illinois would favor Biden by less than 10% in this scenario, while New Jersey would remain just above 10%, but below that 12% safe threshold. These are reliably Democratic states that could become perhaps slightly competitive. So this map here is about as close as we can get at this point to seeing how Trump's current polling advantage over Biden would translate to a 2024 Electoral College Map, with each state's individual shift also factored in. But the thing is that he doesn't need to. He already proved that in 2016, and as the pro-Republican bias of the Electoral College is only expected to increase in 2024, he could theoretically still lose the popular vote by more than 3% and manage to win more than 270 electoral votes. With that in mind, it is absolutely imperative for the Biden campaign to find a way to improve his job approval numbers and start to pull back in front of the former president in head-to-head polling sooner rather than later. He's got a lot of ground to make up. That is all for today's video, though. Let me know what other videos you would like to see in the future. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video down below if you did, and subscribe to the channel while you're at it. You can check out more content from my channel here, and as always, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. EP out.